When I sit down to write a new cue, I often start the same way, with a simple sound and processing in a way that is unique to me and the project that I'm working on. This time, that bass was a simple, dark, muted piano patch, and the tool that I used to turn it into this full textural bed for a cue was a new-to-me plugin from Polyverse called Filterverse, which they sent over to me to actually put to work in a cinematic context. On paper, it's 30 plus filter types, 3 routable slots, and 8 modulation sources you can patch in easy and unique ways. But honestly, filter undersells it. I mean, in practice, it behaves less like an EQ/filter and more like a modular synth that just happens to start from filtering. So in this video, instead of a full in-depth feature tour, I'll show you some of the basics, but I really want to show you what it's like to work with this in an actual film scoring cinematic type of workflow, starting from just one instrument and building outward the way that I usually would on an actual scoring job. Let's dive in. All right, so we have Filterverse here pulled up in Logic, and I'm just running a very simple piano patch from SRM Sounds. This is their dark mode. And I think it's a great baseline for cinematic sound design. I often love starting with a really simple felted or muted piano patch. And so as we look at Filterverse here, it presents itself right away as a really standard filter plugin, but that's very much just the surface, as you'll see. So on this first default patch that opens, you've got your very standard cutoff, resonance, like that it can self-oscillate. That's kind of cool. And then you have your type switch that sort of cycles between the most everyday common filter types. I like that the type fader here slides between and morphs between the different primary filter types that you might reach for in an everyday scenario. You got poles, you got a little bit of drive, and I love that you can also do gain staging on both the in and the outside, depending on what type of processing you get yourself into. You have 3 different bays for filters, but as you'll see, these filters are oftentimes very much anything but filters or very filter adjacent. And so as you click into these, there's a drop down of all the different modules or filter types that you can put in. It seems to start more bread and butter. There's literally one called bread and butter, and it evolves to much more crazier things here near the end, like time warp, which is a granular effect, or a delay effect. There's one here, I believe that's even based on spring coils. Here, coils. Barber pole. Yeah, some really crazy non-filter things that you can put in these filter slots. So we'll get to that in a minute. But the other thing I want to point out is that as you start to get creative with your sound design, you can choose the order of how these are processed, and I think that's a neat feature as well. So the bottom row down here is where you can patch in your custom modulation sources, as far as I can tell. So yeah, you've got random generators, you have things like envelope followers, you even have oscillators. This can really become a synthesizer in and of itself if you get creative with it. It's pretty amazing. You have pitch detection, a sequencer, in the way that you can assign different sequencer or modulation parameters to the different filter units. So I found that to be quite intuitive. So you can quickly start to do some really crazy stuff. I mean, if, for example, I wanted to take, let's say, this random generator, and as I drag this around, okay, I can have different rates, different subdivisions, I can tempo sync it, and then I can apply this random generator to the cutoff, for example. And then I can use this little modulation matrix icon here underneath the cutoff. Here's random. And let's see, I can choose whether it's positive or negative, and I can then apply, it's going to modulate the cutoff in a random way. If I speed it up. So it's really easy to get something off the ground, and it's really quite intuitive, actually, the way they have this built out. So that's kind of the basics of what you have to work with. And that's obviously just scratching the surface. Let's take a look at some of the presets, because I think that's where a lot of the fun is in this, as a starting point at least, especially because it is so complex. I love that there are some categories here, things that I wouldn't necessarily expect in a filter plugin. But let's take a look. I'm just going to scroll through a few at random. That's quite nice, very granular. This one's crazy. It's got a pitch follower of some sort. Let's see what's going on under the hood here. So you can see, yeah, there's a pitch detection running, and that pitch detection is driving, looks like the cutoff of this robocomb, and maybe something else here in this. This looks like a phaser of some sort. Wild. So yeah, it's pretty bizarre, the things that start to happen here. So the way that I would approach this plugin, especially in the more sound designy phase, would be to build out a sonic palette or bed for a cue that I'm working on. And sometimes I'll use some processing and load that into a sequencing plugin, something that can kind of, modulate. And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll use these multi-effects plugins as a way to sort of take a simple sample source or a little loop that I record and use a combination of effects, granular, sequencing, filtering to create loops that can be playable, or just something that I can arrange on the timeline as a baseline that I can then layer on melody and other things like that. I'm going to try to do something like that, maybe starting with this preset I quite like. I'm thinking maybe, let's see if I'll do a couple different layers. Here we go. So we've got this really simple loop going on. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start playing with some of these controls. Ooh, that gets a little bit sci-fi over there on that side. Let's see what the valley can do. This is obviously being modulated by some random parameters here. One thing I've just realized is that these filter in and out volume offsets are per filter module. So that's useful. So you can blend and gain stage these different effects in the sequence. But then it looks like I also still have an overall output level control, which is handy. Nice. So I'm liking where that's standing right now. So I think what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to make a loop of this. And I'm going to do it maybe at 2 times length. And I wonder if just to add a little variance, I think I'm going to do a little bit of, just a little bit of automation here on that first filter cutoff. Again, it's already being randomized, but just something to keep it dynamic. And so now I'm going to actually convert this region. All right, so now that we have that first loop baked in, I'm going to actually reprocess it through another instance of Filterverse. Okay, so now I'm going to add in this instance of tempo delay, and this is a tempo delay, smoothly cross-fading between tempo divisions, modulating the delay time as possible. So let's turn it on and take a listen. So that's just adding some more subdivisions to this little ARP pattern. The next module that I put on was just a basic Swiss Army knife running in a high-pass filter. It's getting a little bit gnarly, a little bit grainy there, but I like that in this case. A little bit of drive. And I'm actually using this sequencer on this 2-bar sort of slow slope, and I'm applying that negatively on the cutoff and positively on the resonance, just a little bit. So you'll see as it plays, it's going to apply this modulation to those 2 sources, giving it a bit of that movement. And then lastly, I'm going to use this space module, unique adaptation of Polyverse's Comet verb. functions more like a filter than a traditional reverb effect. I want to show you what happens when I manually drag the cutoff while it's playing. It's pretty wild. So yeah, it's both sort of adjusting the room size, but also a bit of a cutoff, a bit of a pitch effect, almost like you're adjusting a speed on a tape delay. It's really, really cool. All right, and then I'm going to take this, bounce it down, and let's start to arrange something. All right, I've got it here looped out, applying a little bit of reverb to it just so that the crossfades between the loop points are a little bit more smoothed out. At this point, I've taken the one piano patch and run it through Filterverse's universe of sound. And man, it's already stopped sounding like a piano and much more like a synth or a textural type of thing. And for a media composer, that's kind of the name of the game. It's really, really useful. You know, normally getting an original sounding bed like this means digging through sample libraries or loop banks, chaining 4 or 5 plugins together sometimes to get something, and that's fun, but here it's one instance, one plugin, just patched in a few different ways. I just love that it's all under the same roof. So I bounced that down into a loop, and now I'm going to reprocess it, start layering strings, put a pad on top, maybe some sub bass, going for a Thomas Newman-ish sort of textural underscore. That's a space that I tend to gravitate towards. So I'm going to build this out the way that I would actually would, and then we'll come back into the screen recording and I'll show you what I ended up with. So breaking down the tracks, pretty simple. We've got the piano layer. This is just doing the basic chords. And then I made this other piano bounce and place layer running through another Filterverse preset. It sounds like this. Almost like a filtered Celeste kind of vibe. And then we've got the strings. Those are pretty much just unprocessed. Here's this reverse pad. And then down here, we've got that first loop that we made. And I had automated some of the Filterverse parameters to sort of transition in and out. So it kind of fades out, gets a little bit more tighter near the end. I've got a sub bass as well. And I thought, I wonder if I could create a little bit of a rhythmic engine underneath just using these hi-hats. So I found this cool Filterverse preset. It's called Loop Improver. And I tweaked it a little bit, and this is sort of what we ended up with. Overall, I really love this. For building an original sounding bed out of acoustic sources like piano, strings, often Rhodes or Mellotron type of things, you know, this will become one of those first plugins that I reach for instead of stacking 4 or 5 different tools. And honestly, for everyday filtering in a mix, just as a Swiss Army knife, it's probably going to replace my standard go-tos. Everything you'd want out of a filter is already in here, and it stays as clean as you want, and simple as you want, or it can get super unhinged as well. I also found that the internal clipping and saturation sounds good in musical too, so if you want to push it a little bit, it's good for that. You know, my only real knock is that on my M2 MacBook Air, which is a bit of an older computer, a lower spec, running Filterverse alongside a screen capture program, it got noticeably CPU hungry with not that many instances running, especially the more effects stacked or granular based modules that I was using. It's It's worth keeping in mind if you're on a similar stripped down setup like me, but my workaround was just bouncing the heavier chains down to audio once I liked them, instead of running everything live for the whole session. And this is often something that I'll do anyways for, CPU heavy sample libraries. So overall, that's a pretty small thing in the big scope of what you get in this plugin. It's just simply a massive universe, literally, of sound. So that's the review. Filterverse is only $149 from Polyverse. It's a great value. Links down below if you want to check it out yourself. Thanks again to Polyverse for letting me put it through a real session. And if you want more of this kind of music production process videos, please subscribe. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks for listening.